Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Medicine for These Times. I am so honored to have Veda Austin with us here today. Hi, Veda. Thank you for being here.
Hi, it is such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you. I know we were just chatting a little bit off camera about how exciting this is, how my friends and community were like, wow, asking questions. And I have a list of questions that they want to ask. And this work with water, I personally have been talking about how water is the medicine. It's the medicine, the healer, the great healer of the earth, the great communicator for many years. And when I came across your work, I guess it was only like a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was like, wow, this is a whole next level of Masaru Emoto, what he was
Masaru.
doing in Japan. Yeah. This is just so beautiful. So let's get into it. First, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge water. This is water from a spring that's about 8 minutes from my house that runs clear. And I actually feel the higher vibration when I drink it. I feel like my eyes clear up and I can see better. So we'll just take a moment to honor this beautiful sacred water. May you be protected. May you run abundantly throughout the earth and be clear and harmonious and be abundantly available to all human beings at all times from now until eternity. Thank you so much, water, for all you give to us and for your beautiful blessings on earth. And I can't wait to see what's in store for you in the future. Aho.
Uh,
So yeah, Veda, in case this audience hasn't heard of you, I would love to know, even though I've heard this before, what is it, you call yourself a water researcher and crystallographer, but what is it you say you do? And then I'm curious, like, what brought you on this path doing this for your living? Were you in a different field? Did you have a different career path at one point? And I'm always curious, like, what was your story to getting to where you are today?
sure. Well, essentially, excuse me, what I do is that over the last 14 years, I have been absolutely prolifically taking photographs of water in a specific state of freezing. So I say freezing like this because essentially I'm not freezing water into a solid. I freeze water into what's called a liquid crystal. So it's a state between liquid and ice, and it has different properties. It has more viscosity. So we can prove that by, for example, a lady did some beautiful crystallography. So that is a specific state of ice that is stuck to the glass dish. And she was using a glass baking dish. I use glass petri dishes. And it, rather than it evaporating and melting, it actually rolled and scrolled upon itself. So when you see that this particular type of, I, I'm going to call it ice so that people kind of know what I mean, but it's not exactly, rolls upon itself. It can have wrinkles. It can have like kind of rolls and shapes. So you can really see viscosity. It has more negative charge. It absorbs more light and emits more light, and varied other things. So this is a unique state uh, of liquid crystal, more like a gel in a way, but it kind of still looks like ice. And so what I've been able to do is see that water as a liquid can absorb information through light, essentially, and can then, when given a conducive environment, take that information to make it in form. So the information of whatever it was is received and translated into form. So the information becomes in form. And by that, for example, I could put my hand in the water or think a thought of a hand, perhaps. And I can explain a little bit more the way in which light is the highway for that information exchange, maybe later on. And then when I freeze the water to a specific freezing level, then you may well see an imprint of the hand. And if it's not the hand, it might be some of the designs that are on the hand. It could be look more like a fingerprint. It could look like this side or this side of the hand. It could look like the bones in the hand. It could look like an X-ray of your hand. So it's like water can take snapshots of all of the different parts or areas of the hand or even the nail and translate that into information. And so what I love about this work, and also part of what I've been doing for the last several years, is teaching people how to do this, because I don't use a microscope. Unlike Masaru Emoto, I actually use a regular freezer, and I take photos on my iPhone, and children and adults all alike can do this work, and that's part of the fun for me. And I essentially got into this work through a series of events. But I've done a lot of different things. We all have different. We're all rather multifaceted, and that includes me. When I was much younger, I always wanted to be an archaeologist, so I went to university to start studying, and I was studying for a little while, archaeology, and then my mum got very, very sick, so I prioritized her. And so I didn't take that further, and I was with mum until she passed away. And then I also worked professionally as an oil painter for many years. So this work that I do now satisfies the artist in me. And then I had children, looked after children, and then I got into research and development because I had a very profound healing experience with a natural artesian water here in New Zealand. After having been in a horrendous car accident. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver was decapitated. Actually, it was one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone lived. And over the course of 20 years, I had 8 surgeries. And on my 8th surgery, I woke up surrounded by doctors, and I'd gone in for a bowel resection where the setback had crushed my internal organs and couldn't eat food anyway, it was a whole thing. But I woke up and they told me that I hadn't recovered well, and now I had showers of blood clots in my lungs, and I had to be on blood thinners potentially for the rest of my life, which was shocking to me. And so for 3 months, I took warfarin, this blood thinner, because they said I'd die if I wouldn't. And so after that, I decided, I had a clean chest x-ray, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on this natural healing journey. I know my body can heal. I knew it could heal because 3 doctors after when the car accident happened all those years ago had told me I'd never be able to have children based on the amount of scar tissue around my reproductive organs. And so I'd already had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't have any. So I had 3 beautiful miracle children. And I knew that my body could do things even though doctors had told me that it couldn't. And I was able to take what they said and put it on the shelf, not ignore it, but not focus on it, and just let my body make that decision. So I made a decision, and it wasn't just a random decision, but it was decided to go on this natural healing journey. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's a doctor, medical doctor, but also practices Ayurvedic medicine. And he said to me, why don't you start with the foundation of life and start with a naturally alkaline water? And I thought that just seemed so simple. And so in New Zealand, we have lots of naturally alkaline water sources. Most springs are naturally alkaline. That's anything above a 7 in pH or power or potential of hydrogen. And that led me on to eventually finding a remarkable water. The man was only giving it to cancer patients at the time. It was his own private source. It was 9.9 pH out of the ground. And on day 10, I noticed all these bumps coming up on my arm and jaw that was super painful. And I knew my body was purging, but I didn't know exactly what. And then there was one area that was super angry. And so I ended up getting these tweezers, and I pulled this little shard of green glass out of my arm. And between day 10 and 12, I'd picked 27 pieces of green glass out of my arm and jaw, mostly on the side. And they had been embedded in my body for over 20 years because the man who died in the car accident owned a nightclub, and in the back of the car were crates of Steinlager beer, which is a lager in a green glass bottle. And so when the car rolled, my right side got more green glass and my left side got more windscreen. And then it went on to me asking the question, how on earth can this water possibly purge glass that had been in there for over 20 years? How could it do that? How is this possible? What makes this water different? And that led me on to a whole plethora of questions. And I think when you study water, you end up with just so many more questions because the answers just get deeper and deeper. And I trialed a lot of people on this water, and everybody had pretty incredible results, all the way from like, more purging of foreign objects to someone who did a 27-day water fast, and 3 weeks after the fast on this water, he had no trace of cancer whatsoever in his body, to depression being just improved so much. One lady got pregnant. She'd been trying to get pregnant and got done rounds of IVF. On her first month, she got pregnant. Everyone's skin improved. Everyone's eyesight improved. So it's interesting you talked about your eyesight, feeling clearer. That is a real sign of something special about that water. And then I looked at an analysis, of course, and I'm like, well, what makes it special? And after reading everything, and it's got bicarb, it's got lime, which makes it naturally alkaline, blah, 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 blah. And there is a big difference between naturally alkaline water and ionized water that has been unnaturally made alkaline because of the stability. It's much more stable if it's natural. It doesn't last. It's once it's exposed to oxygen, it's exposed to the air, essentially, and the pH starts to drop generally with ionized water. Structurally, they're totally different as well. But anyway, that led me on to asking, well, what is water really? Because when I looked at an analysis, I just look at what a water holds, not what water is. And that led me on to thinking, well, I mean, you ask a scientist or a teacher, what is water? They'll tell you it's H2O, two hydrogens and oxygen. But actually, someone else said to me, what if the two hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity and the large oxygen is masculine in a mode of gravity, and together they create liquid water in balance on Earth? I'm like, well, that means a bit more to me. But the more important discovery is when I found out water is mostly light. It's only 1 part hydrogen and oxygen, the rest is photonic light, meaning that water is a lighthouse, meaning that there are trillions of water molecules in your body. There are more water molecules in your body than all the stars in the perceivable universe. And yet all we're taught at school is that water is H2O. And I've seen so many children glaze over when they hear that, because it's not taught to mean something to you in that term, in the way it's presented, outside of when you start talking about protecting the rivers and stuff. But that led me on to looking at what's going on in different people's, in the world of science, and just in the world of water. And yes, you mentioned Masaru Emoto's work, which was very visual, although the science world did not embrace him, for lack of controls, for lack of very different things. But the world really saw themselves differently based off his contrasting photos. And so he really opened the door for people to see themselves as bodies of water sensitive to thoughts, sounds, environment, music, frequency, all these things. And it was really wonderful for people to grasp that a little more, because we look at our body and all we really see as a liquid is our eye lens, and our eye lens is 99% water. But it is more like the water that I freeze my at my frozen stage, my kind of liquid crystal stage. It's more like that water than it is like the water that comes out of our tap, for example. So that sort of led me on into the inquiry of this idea of water storing memory, and is that a real thing? And I'm grateful for my 3-pronged approach to most things, which is science, art, and consciousness, or spirituality, whichever you like to look at. And so looking at what's going on in the scientific realm, why don't science think that water memory is real, that the mainstream? But there is a whole new science of water out there where the idea that water can store information isn't radical at all. And then artistically, I found that water could, as I mentioned earlier, take information and then share that information in picture form. And that came from curiosity. Essentially, without going into details of everyone that inspired me, and there's so many people, I held a glass petri dish of the water that healed me. I've used all manner of different waters over the years now. And I was thinking I'm going to do the most radical thing I could imagine at the time, which was to project a thought into the water. So I'm like, okay, what are we going to think about? And so I'm like holding my dish and I'm like looking in the water at the same time. And I notice there's this bit of fluff floating around in there. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. So I put my hand out, took out the fluff, and I thought, oh, I wonder if my hand will have an impact on the water's quote unquote memory. But I didn't know if that was real. I still don't know if that's the right word even. And so I put it into the freezer, my usual like freezer with peas and broccoli and stuff in it. And I forgot about it and I froze the water solid. Now, I did that for a year in the beginning. After learning and developing my own unique freezing method, a year later, I look back at that first year of freezing water solid and I'm amazed that I got the kind of imagery that I did. When I pulled it out and held it up to the light, there was a very clear hand that looks like an X-ray of a hand. And it took up half of the petri dish, which is like macroscopically humongous. And it freaked me out because it was so clear. And that led me on to going and collecting seawater. And then I saw this fish in there. And then I was, it went on and on and on. And then I developed a new method of freezing when I got very familiar with Dr. Gerald Pollack's work in the fourth phase of water and this stage of water, which is more like a gel. That's when I started to open the freezer earlier and earlier to see when the patterns were developing. And about 5 minutes and 30 seconds in my freezer, slightly different with each person's freezer setting and temperature, but it's not usually too far off. There's liquid on top and ice underneath. So I took it out, took the liquid away, and I photographed the remaining crystallography that sticks to the glass dish. And that's essentially my freezing method, but it is a quantum leap from seeing, if you can see the differences between a solid frozen ice piece compared to what we see now in this crystallography, it's just night and day in the clarity.
For anyone that doesn't have it, get this book. Veda's book. It's just, first of all, it's so beautiful, but this is what you're talking about. They could be just done at home in your freezer with an iPhone and a glass dish. And it doesn't even need to be a petri dish, just a glass dish. And like you said, experiment with the freezer temperatures and the time in there and just have fun and see what comes up. But it is amazing. This book is just so fascinating. Buddhist prayers, chants, hands, intention. Thank you so much for sharing your story. That's so beautiful. And I'm curious, as you went through this and started to have, like even when you said, I got freaked out seeing this, were you already on what I would call a spiritual path? And then, all of this journey with the water has kind of brought you deeper onto your spiritual path? Or were you just kind of like, oh, I don't know about this. And then suddenly it was like, wow, the world is much different than I was ever taught. I'm curious, like.
Well, thanks for asking that question. Not many people ask me that question. Ever since I was a little girl, my mother brought me up to not judge. Not judge a person by the way that they look, and to also be more as non-judging of oneself as possible. My mother really was a walking angel, and she kind of let me develop my own way of seeing the world as well. So I'm grateful for that. And when I was a little girl, I started school at 5, and I remember this teacher saying to me, so does anybody here know what the name of somebody who rides an elephant is? And I thrust my hand up. I was like, oh, first day I'm here and I know the answer. And I said, me, miss. And she said, yes. And I said, it's a mahout. And she said, oh, how did you know that? And I couldn't answer her. I couldn't answer her. I had no idea how I knew that, but I knew the answer. later on, like 6 or 7, Mum would find me sitting on the bed cross-legged chanting Om. I wasn't taught this. My mother didn't name me Veda because she knew anything about the Vedic scriptures. My mother my mother came from England on a Russian ship, which was manned by all women. The only person who was a man was the captain. And she made friends with this Russian woman, and her name was a Veda. It's Veda. And so anyone that's known me up until I became very good friends with the Indian community in my 20s, 1920s, um, called me Veda. But since when the Indian community embraced me and they saw my name, they all called me Veda, and that's kind of just stuck. I like both. You can't go wrong. But even my middle name is a Hindi name. So my mum's was going to call me my middle name Karen, but she spelled everything the way it sounded to her. So she spelled it Karan, which is Arjuna's brother's name in the Bhagavad Gita. And so I have this Veda and this Karan and given names, and so that uh, organically, I suppose, I don't think there's any coincidences, led me to become very, very interested in Vedic philosophy. I lived in Japan for a while, and there was a man I was working for there who followed Vedic philosophy. He was from Trinidad, actually. His name was Jay, and I was so interested. And then came back to New Zealand and curious, like, I want to learn more about this because I loved how non-judgmental it was. There are many paths to God. And so that led me to go to a lecture in Auckland by a woman called Dee Dee, and who's like a renounced Indian nun, I suppose, not exactly, but kind of. And my mum went along to make sure I wasn't getting into a cult. And the philosophy was so beautiful and pure, and it just felt so familiar. And listening to the Sanskrit prayers, I just picked them up so quickly. And, it was interesting because I had planned to go and meet my teacher, this lady's teacher in India, and I'd saved all my money up. And when I had that car accident, I was actually on my way to pay for my ticket to go to India. And after the car had rolled, the bag of money that I had saved, because back then you have physical money and you go and you pay the physical money back to the store. We didn't do stuff digitally then. It just wasn't done back in the day. And so I had all this stash of money that had saved up over a year. And it was in my bag, and my bag had flown out of the window of the car during the car accident and just flown out and was sitting in the middle of the road. And the man who saved me, because this guy in the back of the car, he actually he saw the whole thing, and the car started to spark. Like, it was really, really dangerous situation. But this guy was in a fireproof outfit because he had a MiG fighter jet that he was showing around New Zealand. His name was Paul Jellick. I remember his name. And he heard me cry out because I came to as soon as the car stopped rolling. And he came and he kind of undid the seatbelt. I fell into his arms. And anyway, he was saying that I was speaking a different language. And but so all this series of events, and I said to the guy, after I kind of came around a little bit, can you get my bag, because it's got all my money to go to India? And then eventually, after bowel resections and all of this kind of stuff, I finally went there, and it really felt like going home for me. And meeting my teacher was an incredible experience, and I loved that it helped me contextualize many things that I had already thought of as a very young child. And I've always been interested in what different people believe. I've been very curious in learning about different religions and different philosophies of all different types. And so from a young age all the way up until now, I still to this day feel very blessed to have been born into a family where my mum was just so encouraging for me to learn and feel into what felt the best for me. And I felt like it's given me a lovely kind of platform to be very open in this work with water, and also to see how deep I can dive with it.
Thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's so interesting. I think pretty much all the world's religions bring water into their rituals, right? Their prayers. I mean, look at the history of water and how it's woven into so many different stories and traditions. And, it plays such a pivotal role. And it is interesting how it's so taken for granted here in the like kind of the modern day of most people have it just running on taps and they maybe don't even question where it comes from and what's in it and, like how they feel when they drink it. But I'm curious, like I'm trying to like put myself in the place of someone like this, but me and most of this audience, I think, has an awareness of how important and sacred water is and how we need to actually do a lot of prayers with it because it's changing on the earth. We all know there's pollution and there's the fish in the ocean, and now there's talk of maybe the next world's war is going to be over water. I mean, I don't know if you've heard that theory about people are buying up water, and I mean, here in the US, there's been fights for water and, native land. And, even right here where I live, it's like, oh, there's a spring and it was on someone's land. And then someone shut down. It was two springs right across from each other and someone shut it down. And it was like, wow, drinking water you're making it unavailable to a human. Like, this is our right. It's like you can't take away the sun. So I'm curious, have you thought about, I'm sure it's crossed your mind, like this work that you're doing and of course the interest in it and others out there who are doing the work. And then those of us who are just playing around with water at home and having like profound healing experiences with water. Where do you think this plays a role in our future as a humanity and, the earth in general and like where we're headed as a species and the consciousness that we're heading into? Have you gotten an insight into what water's role is in this?
And water's always played a role in everything. I would say that there it's a difficult one because on one hand we have this perspective. Most of society has a perspective that water is there as a commodity, something that we drink, we bathe in, and that can be bartered for, it seems, even in these contexts that you're talking about. If I have the water, then I have the power, this kind of a thing. And sadly, I think that is just one of the most awful, awful things because we don't see that happening in nature. What we do is we see that we have taken ourselves so far away from behaving like like a nature being into behaving in controlling ways. But that is not necessarily everyone. And one of the things I like to look at is how water is so similar to us in some ways, and so much of us is water. If you boil us down, we're water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. When we come back to that, we start to really see a lot of new perspectives. And one of those things is that I think people don't think that water has its own power or its own spirit, and that it is without power. Therefore, we need to be able to do something about this. And of course, we need to stand up. We do need to make priorities for nature itself and prioritize the nature inside of us as well, because we're not separate to nature. One of the things I would say is that if you look at somebody who's sick, we're polluting ourselves, right? So many people pollute their own bodies by the food that they eat, the things that they look at regularly, the things that they think of regularly that aren't actually serving them. But if you just look at somebody who's physically unwell, they can feel lethargic, they can feel this, they can do this, the doctor might have said they have cancer or something, and then they have to deal with that, right? But how do they deal with that, and what is the best ways that we heal people? And if you just look on a psychological level, anybody that has support, family, people to talk to, positive influences, the things that they watch, for example, are inspiring, funny. Sometimes we forget to have a sense of humor in all of this. It's like all of these different things that actually lift our energy, lift our vibration on a spirit level, helps us heal physically. So the area that I focus on is the level of spirit with water. So there are 3 stages of freezing. The stage that I take the freezing method, my freezing method, which is really early, I take it out. So it's a very thin layer of fine crystal. And then there's a second stage, which looks like water sandwiched between 2 layers of ice, and then you have a solid. I think of it as spirit, blood, and body. And the spirit level is where I'm seeing what is energetic state of health. And so I can take municipal tap water. When you look at the crystallography, it is consistently disordered. I can let that melt and then apply some kind of conscious intention. I could put it by my heartbeat for a minute. I could play a sound frequency for a minute. It doesn't have to be very long. But then after you've done that and you refreeze the same water, and you can do a control where you don't put any influence to the other one. And then you can see, oh my gosh, it's starting to now look like spring water. Here are some hexagon patterns. Here are some star patterns. Here's some burning starting to happen. You can see that it changes, but it doesn't change when there's no influence. So what you see is that there is a structural change, perhaps not a chemical one yet, but I hope in the future that might be a thing. But the fact that we're seeing a structural change after conscious expression of a good environment, of a loving environment, means that this is a change, and any change we see suggests that that change happens also in the physical body. So when we're looking at water outside of ourselves, and we're looking at the way in which, and feeding our mind a lot with fear stunts the progress of crystallographic change. So I tend to look at water, and if people are coming to me, and I have a lot of Indigenous friends. My father is native New Zealand Maori. So, we have a saying here within this culture that the health of the river reflects the health of the people. Mm-hmm. And so that there is no separation between us. We are the kaitiaki, or the guardians of the river source and the water sources. And so when you start to look at it like this, and you start to think, well, what would I need if I just got given some kind of bad news, deemed as bad news? I would need loving support. So when I look at the waters, I am reminded that even the sickest, most polluted water has spirit. And as long as that spirit is alive, and trust me, it is, then even that water can evaporate and transmute if it can't go anywhere. But the spirit knows when there is intention being applied, even if it is not right directly, even if it's from right across the other side of the world. I have done remote studies where people have sent love to a very destructured destructured tap water, and that I've left out and let it melt. And it looks like beautiful spring water after 64 people sent it love. So, I look at what we can do. We talk about the ice caps melting. The melting stage is 4th phase water, is this unique stage of water that I'm looking and studying. And in that stage is where all the information exchange happens. It's where the most light is actually emitted. I look at if I open the freezer at the perfect time, just as the ice is beginning to freeze, but before it's completely taken off, and this is looking through a layer of water. And I've actually photographed light coming out of the ice tips. I think it is light that paves the way for the design of the imagery. And given that we are bodies full of water, salts, minerals, and consciousness, and minerals and salts are, well, the salts are certainly electrical. We have this wonderful electrical component. And then we have light because of that there's water there. And then I was inspired by this Indigenous woman that said she could speak to bees, and she said she would watch their hives for long periods of time until one day a bee somehow communicated to her and said, well, we don't mind you looking at our hive. Could you not look at it for so long because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we prefer it to be darker. So where you put your conscious expression could well be where you put your light. And if you are putting your conscious expression, that light into water, and water is a receiver of light, when given a conducive environment, is able to not only have that absorption of light and information, but is also able to then share that information as it begins to freeze through another medium of light and water. And then because it's a very unique stage, it has different properties, like I've mentioned earlier. So you kind of look at this, and then when people start to recognize that water not just is storing memory, but has a unique way of expressing it. So I'm not seeing like, and this does relate to your question, and I'm trying to just make a point. When we see like a hand, or when we see like a face, because I've done lots of work with different people's photos and all different kinds of things, and I see that water shares information in 3 ways: a signature pattern, which allows you to understand what kind of water it is, then art, which is most people know my work for that, and then hydroglyphs, which are repeated symbols that create a specific, well, essentially they are symbols in ice that have to have repeated at least 50 times after I've used a written word influence in the same word in multiple languages. And so this is where I get more scientific attention from, because we're going to see there is a lot of repeatability. I've photographed and filmed a lot of that, and I've given talks at scientific conferences showing all of the repeatability. And that means there's sort of like language of coding, essentially, that allows us to read messages in water literally. Although it's very rudimentary start, like I feel like I'm an infant learning this work, but we're getting there. But my point is that when people start to see that water has its own unique way of actually expressing itself, it's like the voice piece for nature, and that not only are we made up of all of this water, but all living things are made up of this water. And that there's water in the air. The fact that we breathe out means there's water in the air, and that there are more than the 3 stages we've been taught in school, more than a liquid, solid, and gas. There is a type of gel, and I believe that there are at least 7 to 10 different states of water. And I also think that intuition is one of those states. Thought is one of those states. And so why do I say some of that? Because I have also been working with some of the autistic non-speakers who can communicate via letterboards and also through telepathy. And I've been working with them for about 7 months now. And their insights and connectedness to other realms of consciousness has been beyond any words, I have to say, and beyond any thoughts that I might have had around these new states of water anyway. But certainly supports a lot of my thoughts around water, not as conscious, but potentially as consciousness. So, yeah, I mean, that's just jumped from here to here. My point is that if we just are able to stand at a water source and recognize the power of its spirit, no matter what it looks like, and empower it through our encouragement of expansion of its spirit, we heal best from the inside out, from the spirit first. It wouldn't probably get to a dis-ease state if we focused on healing those unresolved, feelings that we have that we tend to store. If we could just start fixing those, we wouldn't necessarily get so unwell. But it's this like and remembering that water, when it's not in the body, has far more power because it's not attached to all of the ways in which we think, where it's more like an observer and a participant, both. Although that's a lot like us as humans too. We can observe ourselves and be an active participant and have water memory, because the fact that we can remember anything about our life is because the water within us has stored all of those memories. And Alzheimer's too is a slow stage of dehydration. Aging is a stage of dehydration in many ways. So that's why drinking qualitative water that is these living properties. It's not that water dies, it's just that there are these living properties when you're able to go and collect spring water, for example, that can be very rejuvenating and help you become very much more youthful. But this water outside of us also has power. And I want us to feel like, well, what would be great is us to empower it, because it will change direction if it is actually seen as not being best for everything. Like, water has its own sort of unique mind. All tributaries are going back towards source. Like, we're all going back towards source. We're all a tributary of creator in many ways, and creators in our own way. But all going back to source, all going back to the primordial ocean. But I've seen and spoken to Indigenous who are saying, yeah, when there's something happening where it's better for water to go in a different, it will change direction. And so I think there is a great deal of intelligence within nature itself, and that if what we focus on is what we're going to see the world lens out. That's our world lens. And so I wake up in the morning most every day and I look at what I'm grateful for. What can I do in this day to make a difference? What can I do in this day to either make a difference for the water within me or the water outside of me, or in the bodies of water that I love, like my children and my husband and my friends and family? And we starting there is something you can do, because we don't know how long we're going to be in this body for. In my car accident, for example, it's like, oh yeah, at any moment, this body, this life can go. So I could focus my attention on all of the things that I can't change, or I could focus my attention on what I can change or what I can do in a positive way. And that really reminds me of my egg study. I did a study on egg albumin, which is essentially a part of the egg white. And the reason I did that is I thought that if any water is going to be naturally informed, it's going to be amniotic fluid. But since that's not readily available, I thought, oh, why don't I start working with eggs? And so what I found after hundreds, if not a couple of thousand of experiments, I suppose. I don't like that word too much, but with the eggs, I suppose it's kind of what it was. Where I was cracking open free-range eggs and seeing that they have very specific patterns that I've categorized and I've named. And there are six main ones, but the free-range eggs only have two of the same patterns. They can only have two, and they're the most rudimentary. And after looking at Luc Montanure's work about DNA teleportation, which is better to just Google it, essentially, I thought, what if I put a free-range egg next to a caged hen egg? Will one impact the other structure? And so when I did that, in the first one, I just put one beside the other. I left overnight. And because I'd done so many, I knew the exact patterns because they don't change. They're the same for all bird eggs. And so I saw, oh, here are the beautiful patterns still with the free-range egg, but oh, look, the caged hen egg started to improve so much that it starts to look like a free-range egg, and that was really surprising. And when I showed that on social media, people were like, oh yeah, that's so cool, but what if you're surrounded by bad eggs? It's definitely going to go bad. And so I thought, okay, well, let's do this. So I put a free-range egg in the middle, surrounded it by caged hen eggs, and did controls and used the same batch of caged hen eggs and all the rest of it. And what I found was there was healing by proximity. The free-range egg didn't destructure, it actually stayed as beautiful as ever. But all of the free-range eggs, the caged hen eggs surrounding it, sorry, they all improved, but the ones that were closest to it improved the most to look just like free-range eggs. And I've repeated that study multiple times. So what that's saying is that the most coherent thing positively impacts the least. And so if we really want to make change and we want to help water, we start with healing the waters within us. Just healing ourselves impacts our environment, impacts the people around us and the animals and the plants and the soil and the earth and the water around us. So the best place to start is always there, rather than getting overwhelmed with what we see as our worldview, which can change our internal environment in a maybe fear-based way, is like the ways in which we can empower ourselves and by empowering also others. There's love, that there's a love equation, love plus love equals love. It's not something that just, runs out. So it's it's eternally abundant. And if we can think also that the idea of water is eternal abundance as well, because when we're looking at things from a scarcity perspective, that also starts to, and also like, how could that person do that? How could this person do that? How can this collective do that? Is there going to be a world war? I mean, I remember walking along Dominion Road when I was a little girl, and there were two men standing with signs saying the end of the world is nigh. And I said to my mum, oh no, oh God, are we all what's happening? And she said, oh, they were out there last year and the year before saying the same thing. So, we can so easily become worried and scared. And I think as water protectors, we also need to be mindful that we are bodies of water. And what are we doing to heal this environment before we can even talk about healing that environment? Because that environment is a free spirit too. It also knows where it needs to go. And maybe sometimes it does go into places we think, why would water want to be polluted and want to go in that direction? Why can't it just go that direction? Well, I mean, there's always a bigger picture. It may well be protecting something else. We don't always understand, and that gives that water, we could just give it so much more credit, so much more love, so much more awareness. And so and knowing that it won't stay that way, it will evaporate. And from that, it will learn, just like humans. There's people, we're all in all different kinds of states, all different kinds of sickness bodies, all kinds of ways of torment and torture and also love and joy and in all of the different expressions as humans. I see that water is experiencing itself in everything, in every different way, in the child that's starving and in the person that is in a great abundance, in every way, just as some might say that Creator is experiencing itself in every different perspective, to observe every perceivable perspective of life.
Yes. So beautiful. And everything you shared, it makes complete sense. It's right, as above, so below. Everything in nature is the path of least resistance and harmony. It's like, it's just the natural state of the light prevailing. It's always the direction I think nature wants to go in. And yes, in our world today, I think so many people are pointing the finger externally and focusing in on the negative because, of course, the algorithm seems to love the negative, right? The media makes money on the negative. So it's so easy to get caught up in the fear. But like you said, it's, for those of us, and I think most of the listeners here, especially people working with, sacred plant medicines or non-ordinary states, we know all is one. Everything is consciousness, every single thing, including, there's an argument recently, AI. I'm like, yeah, well, it's here. It's part of our world, right? I don't love it, but it's part of the consciousness. And so if we believe that everything is one and one consciousness and everything's connected, then why can't saying your daily prayers and, like I wake up in the morning and first thing I do is say a prayer to the water and hold it up to the sun. And even just that little tiny act, it's like that one little thing. Imagine if most of humanity did that. What would our world look like? And it's funny because, I mostly do business coaching. I know I'm helping people go through a deep soul changing experience where they're really coming into their true selves. But one of the first things I tell my clients is say your prayers to the water. I mean, it's super simple. Are you actually speaking out loud, like what it is that you want support with? And are you grateful for what you do have and for this sustainer? This is like the ultimate medicine. And I personally have had these extreme, profound experiences interacting with water that, it could rival someone working with a plant medicine or someone going into a non-ordinary, state or a samadhi state. But even just to start to recognize, what's opening up for your life. How do you feel? For me, it was actually many years ago. I forgot how long ago, but it was when I started intentionally. I lived in New York City, really pretty hardcore city water. And I started intentionally filtering my water, filtering out fluoride, and really working with it intentionally. And I noticed, like my mind started to change. It was going through a pretty deep path of awakening, but at the same time, it was like these subtle shifts in my reality. And I really believe it was just having a different relationship with the water. And I think this is why the work that you're, and it's no coincidence that your work is coming out there more and more people are talking about this. And I've been saying this for years. I've had friends say it. It's like all the world's problems, like we all think it's political leaders or whatever it is. But, if we actually bring it back to this place of intention and prayer, and forget even the word prayer, but just the consciousness, like you said, the consciousness of healing, just going back in and like starting with each and every tiny little piece of, it's like every little energetic love that is connected to your cells. It's as above, so below, everything is connected. And I do believe this is the frontier of how we're going to have to make change on earth. People think it's politics or who you're electing but it's like, it's so much bigger than that. That's my theory. And I do believe water is one of the most important, places we can start. And actually I work with the sun and then the earth itself, but it's like these elements that are us and having that awareness. So I love everything you share about this. So I'm curious, I'm going to ask a couple questions and my friends were like very specifically, when you talk about, let's see, the new codes or the codes in the light codes, has anything new come up recently? Like, are you still constantly getting like next level of, interactions with the water, now that you're working with the autistics? Has there been anything that's been like shocking, like even in the last couple months? Or is it like, oh, now it's just the same repetitive patterns? Like, I'm curious, are you constantly always seeing something new come through?
I mean, water is always surprising me. The coding that I've been seeing is like one of the things, because I've been shooting a documentary. When I was on my book tour in the States, we filmed some of Elsa and Brandon, who are two of the non-speaking autistic young people that I've been working with. And when you start to really work with them and you start to see, like Elsa said to me, some of the coding, it's in the viewing there is healing of some of this coding that looks just like ancient language that does repeat around the world and that thousands of people have also seen using my method. It is just like cuneiform or hieroglyphs. It looks very, very similar. And so it's almost actually undeniable that there's coding there. But she said that there is coding for different diseases to help heal diseases from the viewing of them. And she basically put me a challenge to find out, cures for cancer. So it's no small thing to ask me. But still, I'm totally excited to pursue that, to see how that goes. One of the things in the last 2 months have been an extremely challenging time for me, and I've also been focused on my family. So I haven't been, it's the first time I think in 14 years that I've really taken a break from doing this work as prolifically. But sometimes life is like that, right? And I'm coming out the other side of that. And one of the things that I have done that did freak me out is that over the last couple of 3 years, I've also known that working with water in mirrors was going to be a very potent learning. But in my mind, or as a thought that just kind of popped in, it was like, well, are you really ready to do that though? And I knew I wasn't. And then in a more unthinking space, I just thought, oh bugger, I'm just gonna do this. And by unthinking, I have to be very mindful of this, because sometimes when you do something and you've been warned, are you ready? You really have to be ready. And I was just sort of, I just did this thing anyway. So I got these two mirrors and I put them over the top and bottom of the glass petri dish with water inside, and I put them all of it in the freezer. Um, but I wasn't really ready for what I was seeing, what it came out. So what came out when I took the first mirror off was that I could see that the crystallography was there, but there was a circle in the middle that had started to, and this kind of tube had started to grow around the circle. So it had started to create this tube, and I'm pretty sure that if it hadn't been a solid bottom, it had been able to somehow, and I don't see how it could have done that, but it may well have kind of come both ends. But when I took the mirror off, I saw the water do something I've never seen it do before. So this three-dimensional building had happened, but I also saw it, rather than starting to like melt, because all this thin scaffolding was there, it started to grow. I saw it starting to grow, and I like threw the dish into the basin and it just broke. It was like it kind of freaked me out, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm opening some portal and I don't know what I'm doing. I really need to like not do that right now, because I need to be in a very different space, in a much more aware space, knowing how I'd thought about that and been nervous about doing it, and then being in the space of let's just do it. And then seeing something like that. So I wasn't prepared exactly for that. And I need to talk to the autistic community about that and see what
Was it
they
kind of
want.
like a toroid? Like a toroidal, is that what the shape was that you saw?
Well,
Really
it
good.
hadn't got that far yet. It was building upon itself. I should have probably just filmed it and just, but I was just like, people think I get really used to seeing all the work I see,
Yeah.
all the pictures of faces and hands and like whatever it's exposed to and things like that. But there's still some things that I'm still processing, 1 or 2 years later. I tend to, I'm used to seeing pictures, but I'm not now. I'm just starting to become more familiar with more three-dimensional things evolving. It's not the first time I've seen something um, become three-dimensional, like from a thought. I've had ones where I'm working in telepathy and I like project the thought of shapes, right? And I see the shapes appear in the ice. But this one where I projected the thought of a triangle, but just before I sent that kind of message off in my mind, I suppose, to the water, I thought of it as a pyramid. And then rather than being just a triangle picture, it had created a pyramid coming up out of the ice. And that led on to really being very aware that thoughts do become things. And that with the mirror thing, they think I have to be in a different place to start doing that work. But I think that there's importance and significance in the fact that I saw that much. I've already been, researching more about that. So now that I'm coming back online, so to speak, and back into the world and sharing, where I share and I talk and do podcasts and all that kind of thing, because I really just took time off. There's a lot to catch up on, and there's a lot of work to do. Also, one thing that is coming, I am going to start sharing, whether I do it in January in my big webinar that I'm doing, or if I do it before, is that I have many Indigenous who are fighting for their waters, fighting for their land, and protecting. They're real protectors from all over the world. They're always asking, what can they do? And I've got these codes now, these symbols for the world, essentially, so that we can write, even if it's in this, if it's seawater, for example, you can write these symbols in the sand and let the water come in and take it away. You can write them on stones. You carve them in stones. You can, write them. You can do all different things with it. Once you have them, then they are gifts for the wider, bigger bodies of water. They're there for the streams. They're there for the rivers, and they can help water speak to itself from basically it's like a creator's code that I want to give freely to everybody to start doing it, because a lot of people aren't going to take it seriously, which is what it is. But a lot of people will, and the people that do, and they recognize that this is something that has been gifted to me in one of the purest ways, is that this can help shift and change the waters across the world in more profound ways than I can even say. And that's not something I want to have behind some kind of paid wall. I really just want to put it out there on my social media and just tell people, this is what this is. I'm just giving it to you. Just please use it, work with it. So yeah, that's coming soon.
I don't know if you can tell I'm crying. I have tears. And anytime you want to come with us, there's a place where I've been multiple times. That's it's off the Ucayali River in the Amazonian River basin of Peru, in the jungle, deep within the jungle, and it's the most pristine place I have ever been to in my life. You're in New Zealand, maybe that would be up there with it. But this place is just, it's unbelievable. And the waters are just so, like, you really get that this is a living, breathing spirit. And this place, it's the Amazonian River basin. It feels like you're in the heart chakra of the earth. It's just so green and so lush. And I've been there multiple times. I've actually had, I had an interaction. I don't, it's like, how do you put this into normal language? But, I think it was 2017. I actually, they say, the mythology is that there's these sirenitas that live on the river, and there's this plant called bobensana. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's a beautiful feminine water plant. And I actually heard actual voices of these sirenitas, totally sober, but sleeping in the jungle for 10 days. And this area, which is pristine and in the middle of nowhere, and was, it's used by people that care about it. It's like the stories you hear about on the news for, my whole lifetime. Big agriculture has come in and bought up some nearby land and started to clear cut it. And it's just one of those places where you didn't think this would ever happen. There's a group of people that go there very regularly. It's used for healing with sacred plant medicines. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's really annoying to get there. Actually, it takes hours and hours, and you have to go on a boat, and then to hear that this is happening. And my friend, who also spends a lot of time there, actually started up a 501c3, a nonprofit, to help protect this watershed, because it's like the little bit we can do. But, that's where you're like, oh my God, it's like, this is really happening. And then next thing you know, the water's starting to change. And now there's, I haven't been there in a few years, but there's now signs of a little more pollution than there ever was. It was literally pristine. And, and I do believe we need these codes now more than ever, and yeah, I'm in an area of upstate New York where there are still communities here where it's like, yeah, people have had to fight to keep their waters. And what we experience in Standing Rock, and it's just there's multiple stories like this around the earth. And I do believe what you say. It's like we have the consciousness available to create our reality, and at the same time, there's some forces that are, as one of my teachers said, counter evolutionary forces on earth that are working against the greater good of all. And if we can have some codes to start doing these prayers and working with the water, and hopefully we can see some kind of change. I do believe we have to, work in this way. I don't think it's going to be, as someone said, it's not going to be 3D printing a glacier to save the glacier. You know what I mean? Like, we have to
No.
approach. I mean, even Rudolf Steiner said this. Everything's going to have to be approached from a place of spirit and prayer and the consciousness. So, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you said all of those things because I hear all of the stories. One of the things I think that if communities can give rivers the right of personhood, then that does legally help with protection. The Whanganui River here in New Zealand was the first river to be given rights of personhood, and the tribe really pursued that for many, many years. And finally it was given the rights of personhood. And it's so gorgeous. And then the Yamuna and the River Ganges have also been given these rights of personhood. So there are certain ways that people can actually, I'm trying to encourage Pupu Springs down in the sort of top of the South Island, sorry, of New Zealand to be able to get that. It is considered it's like the second clearest water in the world. It's exquisite. And yet there's mining that is going to be going on not too far away. And they're saying, oh, it won't affect the water, but we all know it will. And I'm trying to okay, what can we do? What can we do? And so on one level, I would encourage finding out the legal ways in which the rights of personhood can at least start to be explored. But then on the more subtle spirit level, working with the spirit of water, which is more potent and powerful than we can imagine, and then giving it just for us intentionally, getting these codes out, even if it was 1 million people around the world just writing these codes on their water source for their water sources somewhere in the mud. It doesn't even have to be on a physical thing. The fact that water comes in and receives and goes out. And people might think, oh, that's just whatever. But no, it's not just whatever. It can change. And because a lot of people won't think that's really anything, it won't mean anything. I've only written it once. I've been very mindful because I know there's going to be a particular time that this needs to happen in the next few months.
Astrology.
It's like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
But I tried it. I live close to many beaches where I am in New Zealand, and I went to one particular beach and I wrote this code in the in-between. The in-between space is between where it's all sandy and where the sea is, that sort of wet sand. And so I wrote this code in there, and then the water funny came in and it took it out. And when it came back in, it just brought this perfect shell in exchange right at my feet. It was this perfect clam shell. And it was just like, oh, yeah, thank you. And this is the beautiful work that we can be doing in plain sight, but without it creating any attention. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing this. Oh, I could talk to you for hours, but I am so excited because I am going to Egypt with Veda Austin in a month and a half. I know.
Yeah.
This feels like a trip of my lifetime. It's like a huge part of my life has been connected to the waters, and to call this trip in, and Egypt itself. I started personally. I started getting in meditation, no plant medicine. I started getting visions, I guess you would say, of a particular Egyptian goddess that I didn't know who it was until I finally was like, this has been coming through. Maybe I should just go Google this. And it was Sekhmet. Sekhmet just came to me out of the blue in 2019. And my life completely started changing. And then, since then, I've had a lot of, again, this was usually through dreams, lucid dreams, meditation, pyramids coming to me, healing techniques that I'm not publicly sharing, but things that I'm like, okay, I'm getting a vision showing me what to do with a pyramid, and I don't know what it means, but just, being grateful and using it with caution, with integrity, and I'm seeing it working. And I don't know what any of this means, and I'm going there just with an open mind, an open heart, and with many prayers for this planet. And yeah, I'm excited because I'm assuming that all of us going are probably people on the same path with the same intention. And I'm excited to
Yeah,
see what can open up there.
we're also doing a little more filming for the doco that I'm making when we're there. And I'm bringing Melissa, who's the telepathic communicator, and my very dear friend. She's coming along as well. So she'll be able to actually speak through the autists, through her vision. They see her through her eyes about what's there. The pyramids, Sekhmet is a big piece for why I'm going to. So all of that. We're also going down the Osiris shaft where there's water underneath the Giza Plateau. There's all manner of amazing experiences that will be happening there and things that have been planned that are little surprises too. And working with the water, putting water within the pyramids and from the Nile and in all of these things to see what that crystallography will look like, what we might learn from that. So I'm really excited that you're coming. My oldest son is also coming. And so I
How old
come
is
really
he?
24.
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
sweet. Oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah,
Lucky.
yeah.
Lucky kid.
So yeah, it will be a wonderful sort of little family experience for me. And there's amazing people coming, like just beautiful, like-minded people. So it'll be
Right.
really wonderful for everyone.
So good.
I think it's a wonderful way to kind of also then take all of that information, and I'm going to be sharing it in my webinar at the end of January, um, as well as, having various speakers and amazing. Pam Gregory is going to be
I
on
know
that
it's a
one.
great lineup. I know. And
Yeah.
we'll share the link right here in the show notes because I'll be there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like that's an amazing webinar. That's like a whole entire course, I would say. But
It's it's a whole experience, and it's like we were talking because it's like so many hours long, 7, 8 hours.
it's a
Some of them have
retreat.
been 12 hours long.
Yeah.
Like have popcorn parties and just like watch the whole thing live. But yeah, I mean, there's so much going on, and people can read about it for themselves. Yeah.
And I think what month is it taking place? Exactly, January or February?
For you in the States, or for anyone in like Europe and England, it's on the 31st of January. For me in New Zealand, it's the 1st of February. Yeah.
That's right before one of the most astrologically potent times of our entire history in our lifetime. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
February 26th. I mean, Pam will probably share about it, but I mean, this upcoming year this is the time. Yeah. So great,
Yeah.
great
She's
timing
talking.
for this.
Yeah, she's talking about the new human,
Yeah.
which I think is such an important topic
Yes.
through astrology and all the varied things. But the new human, it's a really potent way that she's thinking, speaking, and I think that only from Pam can you really kind of get that kind of unique information. She's just such an authority on this, and she's such a beautiful person. But yeah, you can see all the different speakers that I've got, and I mean, I could talk about that for ages, but we've been talking a while and I don't want to
Yeah.
take up any
I'm gonna
more
let you
time.
go. Well, and then also, what do you have coming up? And then should we be on the lookout for the documentary, or is that like a year out from like, do you have
The
a target
documentary,
date for that?
yeah, the documentary is at least a year out. We've shot the trailer, and so the trailer should be coming out within the next 3 weeks, hopefully. And we're although it looks like we may have some people interested in helping fund it, but we're still planning on doing some crowdsourcing. So we'll have the trailer so that people can know what we're kind of doing, and then we'll be asking anyone who wants to, make a donation towards it. That would be really great. It's not cheap to create a docu-series, but it's so worth it. It's one of the most important topics of our time and going forward, and for our children and our children's children to be able to have this available for them. So it has got the autistic non-speakers in it, as well as some of my esteemed, experts in their field, as well as a lot of the colleagues that I work with that support the idea that there is a consciousness that cannot be overlooked when you are working with water on all its different levels and all of the different stages of water and phases of water that we will likely discover within the next, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And I think a lot of the people that have been called oh, you're just a pseudoscientist and you're this and you're that and the other thing will be finally going, yes, finally. And people can even get a degree in my work now. I never saw that coming. People can now get certified through Ubiquity University in the science, art, and consciousness of water. And then that can go on to a master's and PhD. I'm finishing my PhD next year.
Wow.
So, yeah, lots of developments.
Well, we'll have your links right here in the show notes. Definitely everybody join in this webinar. And as soon as the trailer's out, we'll add that in. And, we'll just keep spreading the word and reminding people of this sacredness of the ultimate healer and the ultimate consciousness. So thank you so much for the work you're doing in the world. We all appreciate it. It's just been such an honor to have you here. And I can't wait to hang out and see what we uncover in Egypt.
Me too. I know. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.